I'm telling you this because I need someone else to know what happened. I need someone to believe me. This was New Year's Eve 2019, and I was staying at the old Grandview Hotel in Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you've ever been there, you know the place I'm talking about. It's this massive brick building from, like, the 1920s, sits right on the edge of downtown, and half of it's been shut down for years because of structural problems or something. But they keep a few floors open for guests, mostly because it's dirt cheap and people don't ask questions. I was there because I had no choice. My girlfriend at the time, Vanessa, and I had gotten into this huge fight on December 30th. I mean, screaming, throwing things, the whole deal. I couldn't stay at her place anymore, and I wasn't about to drive 3 hours back to my parents' house in the middle of the night. So I booked the cheapest room I could find, which happened to be at the Grandview. $48 a night. That should have been my first red flag. The guy at the front desk was this older dude, maybe in his 60s, with these sunken eyes that made him look like he hadn't slept in weeks. He barely looked at me when I checked in, just slid the key across the counter and mumbled something about the elevator being out of order. I had to take the stairs to the 4th floor. And let me tell you, the stairs were creepy as hell. The walls were this peeling yellow wallpaper that looked like it hadn't been changed since the place opened, and the light bulbs were so dim I could barely see where I was going. My room was at the end of the hallway, room 412. The second I opened the door, I knew something was off. The air inside was freezing, way colder than the hallway, and it smelled like mildew and something else I couldn't quite place. Something metallic. I figured the heat wasn't working, so I called down to the front desk, but nobody picked up. I tried 3 times. Nothing. I thought about leaving, but it was already past 11 p.m., and I was exhausted. Plus, where else was I gonna go on New Year's Eve? So I turned on the space heater in the corner, threw my bag on the bed, and decided to just tough it out for one night. The room was small. Just a bed, a nightstand, a tiny bathroom, and a window that looked out over the parking lot. The TV didn't work, which was fine because I had my phone. I figured I'd just scroll through social media until I fell asleep. That's when I heard it. This faint scratching sound coming from the wall behind the bed. At first I thought it was pipes or maybe a rat in the wall. Old buildings have rats, right? But the scratching was too rhythmic, too deliberate. It sounded like someone dragging their fingernails across drywall, slow and steady, over and over again. I sat there frozen, just listening. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. And then the scratching stopped. Just like that. Complete silence. I waited for maybe 2 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. Nothing. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. It was an old hotel. Old buildings make weird noises. I needed to chill out. I decided to take a shower to calm my nerves. The bathroom was even smaller than the main room, barely enough space to turn around. The shower head was one of those old rusty ones that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the Carter administration. But the water was hot, and that's all that mattered. I stood under the water for a good 10 minutes, trying to wash away the stress of the past 2 days. When I got out and wrapped a towel around myself, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The mirror above the sink was completely fogged up from the steam, but someone had written something on it. 2 words. Get out. I swear to God, I felt my knees almost give out. I stared at those words, my hands shaking, trying to figure out if I'd somehow written them myself without realizing it. But I hadn't touched the mirror. I hadn't even been near it. The letters were drawn in clean, deliberate strokes, like someone had used their finger to write them while I was in the shower. I grabbed my phone and immediately tried calling the front desk again. Still, no answer. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I gonna say? Someone wrote, "Get out of my bathroom mirror?" They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. I got dressed as fast as I could, threw my stuff back in my bag, and was about to leave when I heard it again. The scratching. But this time it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from the closet. The closet door was slightly open, maybe an inch or 2, and I could see darkness inside. Just pure black. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get the hell out of that room and never look back. But I couldn't move. I was just standing there, staring at that closet door, listening to the scratching get louder and louder. And then I heard something else. Breathing. Slow, raspy breathing. like someone was struggling to get air into their lungs. That's when the door opened. Not all the way, just a few more inches. And I saw a hand. A pale, thin hand with long, dirty fingernails reaching out from the darkness. I didn't wait to see what it was attached to. I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't even close the door behind me. I just bolted down that hallway, down those creepy stairs, and out into the parking lot. I got in my car and drove. I didn't stop until I was 20 miles outside of Scranton. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the brightest light I could find, and just sat there shaking. I tried calling Vanessa, but she didn't pick up. I tried calling my buddy Marcus, but it went straight to voicemail. It was almost midnight by then, and I was completely alone. I never went back to that hotel. I never even drove past it again. A few months later, I was telling this story to a coworker, and he looked at me like I'd seen a ghost. He told me the Grandview had a history. Back in the 1950s, a woman had died in one of the rooms on the 4th floor, room 412. She'd been staying there alone on New Year's Eve when she had some kind of mental breakdown. They found her 3 days later. She'd scratched the wall so badly that her fingernails were completely gone. I still think about that night all the time. I think about that hand reaching out of the closet. I think about those words on the mirror. And I think about the fact that I ignored the warning. I should have left the second I saw Get Out. I didn't. And I saw something in that room that I'll never be able to forget. Something that was waiting for me. Or maybe waiting for anyone stupid enough to stay. This happened to me 3 years ago in Portland, Oregon. And I still can't explain it. I'm not the type of person who believes in paranormal stuff or anything like that. But what I experienced that night changed everything I thought I knew about reality. I was working as a delivery driver for one of those food apps, you know the ones. The pay was decent, especially around holidays when people tip better. New Year's Eve was always crazy busy, and I'd signed up for a double shift because I needed the money. My plan was simple. Work until around 10 p.m., head home, grab a beer, and watch the ball drop by myself. I'd just gotten out of a relationship a few weeks before, so I wasn't really in the mood to party anyway. The night started off normal enough. I was getting orders left and right, mostly from downtown Portland, delivering to apartments and office parties. Around 9:30 p.m. I got this weird order. It was for a pizza and wings delivery to an address on the outskirts of the city, near Forest Park. If you know Portland, you know Forest Park is this massive wooded area that stretches for miles. Beautiful during the day, but creepy as hell at night. The address was for a place called Timber Lodge Road. I'd never heard of it, but my GPS said it was about 20 minutes away. The payout was good, almost $30 including the tip, so I accepted it without thinking twice. I picked up the food from this little pizza place on Burnside and started heading north. The further I drove, the darker it got. The streetlights disappeared completely once I hit the edge of Forest Park, and my headlights were the only thing cutting through the pitch black. The road got narrower and narrower until it was basically just a single lane surrounded by trees on both sides. I kept checking my GPS, making sure I was going the right way, but it kept telling me to continue straight. After about 15 minutes, I started getting this uneasy feeling in my gut. Something felt wrong. There were no houses out here, no lights, nothing. Just trees and darkness. I thought about turning around, but I'd already driven this far, and I didn't want to waste the trip. Plus, the customer had paid in advance, so I figured I might as well finish the delivery. Finally, my GPS told me I'd arrived, but there was nothing there. No house, no driveway, no mailbox. Just more trees, and this narrow dirt path that branched off from the main road. I stopped the car and sat there for a minute, trying to figure out what to do. I checked the delivery app, and the address was definitely correct. Timber Lodge Road, number 447. I tried calling the customer, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal. Of course. I was in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service and a pizza that was getting cold. I decided to get out and take a look around, see if maybe the house was hidden back in the trees or something. That's when I noticed the smell. It hit me the second I opened my car door. This awful, rotting smell, like something had died nearby. I covered my nose with my shirt and walked toward the dirt path, shining my phone's flashlight ahead of me. The path was overgrown with weeds and branches, like nobody had used it in years. I walked maybe 50 feet when I saw it. There was a structure back there, but it wasn't a house. It was an old cabin, or what was left of one. The roof had caved in on one side, and the windows were all shattered. The door was hanging off its hinges, barely attached. This place looked like it had been abandoned for decades. I knew right then that something was seriously wrong. Nobody was living here. Nobody had ordered this pizza. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around to head back to my car when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the leaves behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight back toward the cabin. Nothing. Just darkness and trees. But I could still hear the footsteps, and they were getting closer. I started walking faster, then jogging, then straight up, running back to my car. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it was gonna explode. I got to my car, threw the food in the back seat, and jumped in. I locked the doors immediately and started the engine. That's when I looked in my rearview mirror and saw someone standing at the edge of the trees. A figure, just standing there, completely still. I couldn't make out any details because my headlights were facing the wrong direction, but I could see the outline. Tall, thin, just watching me. I threw the car in reverse and backed up as fast as I could, not even caring if I hit anything. I spun the car around and floored it back down that road. I didn't stop until I was back in the city with streetlights and other cars around me. I pulled into a 7-Eleven parking lot and just sat there shaking. I checked the delivery app again, and the order was gone, like it had never existed. There was no record of it in my completed deliveries, or my earnings. Nothing. I even checked my bank account the next day, and I never got paid for that delivery. It was like the whole thing had been erased. I tried looking up Timber Lodge Road on Google Maps when I got home, but I couldn't find it. I drove out there again a week later in broad daylight, trying to retrace my steps, but I couldn't find that dirt path or that cabin. The road just ended at a gate that said private property, no trespassing. I quit the delivery job a month later. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had lured me out there on purpose. That order wasn't real. That address wasn't real. But that figure standing in the trees, that was real. I saw it. And I think it saw me too. I still don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten out of my car any slower, or if I'd walked any further into those woods. Part of me doesn't want to know. Part of me is just grateful I made it out of there at all. But every New Year's Eve since then, I stay inside. I don't work. I don't go out. I just stay home and try not to think about what was waiting for me in those woods. I work security at a storage facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's not glamorous or anything, but the pay is decent, and the shifts are usually quiet. I've been doing it for about 4 years now, mostly night shifts because they pay a little extra. The facility is pretty big, maybe 200 units spread across 3 buildings, and it's located off Highway 169, kind of in this industrial area where there's not much else around. New Year's Eve 2021, I got stuck working the overnight shift. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Most people requested that night off, but I didn't really care. I had no plans anyway, and the holiday pay was too good to pass up. My supervisor, a guy named Dale, told me it would be dead quiet. Nobody comes to a storage unit on New Year's Eve, right? The shift started off exactly like he said. Dead quiet. I did my usual rounds, checked the gates, made sure all the locks were secure. Everything was fine. Around midnight, I was sitting in the security office watching the ball drop on this little TV we keep in there. I remember thinking how weird it was to be completely alone when the clock hit 0. No fireworks, no cheering, just me and the hum of the space heater. About 20 minutes past midnight, the motion sensor alarm went off for Building C. That's the furthest building from the office, all the way in the back near the fence line. The alarm system shows which unit triggered the sensor, and this one was Unit C47. I checked the logs, and according to the records, that unit had been rented by some guy named William Marsh back in 2018. He'd paid up front for 5 years, which was unusual, but not unheard of. Some people just want long-term storage and don't want to deal with monthly payments. I grabbed my flashlight and headed over to Building C. It was cold that night, probably around 30 degrees, and the wind was picking up. The building is just this long metal structure with roll-up doors on both sides, kind of like a giant garage. Unit C47 was near the end, and when I got there, I immediately noticed something was off. The lock was missing. Not broken, not cut, just gone. The door was pulled down and secure, but there was no lock on it. I stood there for a minute, trying to figure out what to do. Protocol said I should call the police if there's evidence of a break-in, but I wanted to check inside first. Maybe the renter had come by and forgot to put the lock back on. I pulled up the door, and the smell hit me right away. It wasn't a rotting smell or anything like that. It was chemical, like bleach, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. I shined my flashlight inside, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The unit was maybe 10 by 15 feet, and it was completely empty, except for one thing. A folding chair sitting right in the middle facing the door. That's it. Just a metal folding chair positioned like someone had been sitting there waiting. The concrete floor around the chair was stained with something dark, and there were scratch marks on the walls. Deep scratch marks, like someone had dragged their fingers down the metal over and over again. I backed out of there immediately and called Dale. He didn't answer, so I left a voicemail explaining what I found. And then I called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher said they'd send an officer out, but it might take a while since it was New Year's Eve, and they were dealing with a bunch of drunk driving calls. I went back to the office and pulled up the security footage. We have cameras at the main gate and at the entrance to each building, but the angles don't cover the individual units. I rewound the footage to see if anyone had entered Building C that night. Nothing. Nobody had driven through the gate. Nobody had walked past the cameras. But that motion sensor had definitely gone off. I sat there watching the live feed, waiting for the police to show up, when I noticed something on the Building C camera. There was someone standing in the doorway of Unit C47. Just standing there, perfectly still, facing the camera. I couldn't make out any features because of the distance and the low light, but I could see the shape of a person. My blood went ice cold. I grabbed the radio and was about to call out, ask if anyone was there, but then I remembered I was alone. There was nobody else on site. I looked back at the screen, and the figure was gone. I locked myself in the office and didn't move until the police showed up about 40 minutes later. 2 officers came and I showed them the unit. They looked around, took some photos, and told me they'd file a report. One of them said the stains on the floor looked old, probably nothing to worry about. They asked if I wanted to review the footage with them, but when we pulled it up, the figure I'd seen was gone. The timestamp showed the exact moment I'd been watching, but the doorway was empty. Just an open unit with a chair inside. The officers left, and I finished my shift sitting in my car with the doors locked. When Dale came in the next morning, I told him everything. He checked the records for Unit C47, and that's when things got even stranger. There was no William Marsh in the system. The unit was listed as vacant and had been for over 3 years. Nobody had rented it since 2018. I don't work night shifts anymore. I requested to switch to days, and Dale approved it without asking questions. I think he knew something was seriously wrong with that unit. They ended up sealing it off a few weeks later, said there was structural damage or something. But I know that's not why they closed it. I still think about that chair and those scratch marks. I think about that figure standing in the doorway, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed in that unit any longer. Part of me thinks something was waiting in there, and I walked right into it. Part of me thinks I'm lucky I walked back out. I drive a cab in Chicago. Been doing it for about 6 years now. Mostly night shifts, because that's when you make the real money. New Year's Eve is always insane. Drunk people everywhere, surge pricing through the roof, tips flowing like crazy. I usually make more on that one night than I do in an entire week. This happened last year, New Year's Eve, 2024. I'd been driving since about 8 p.m., picking up people heading to parties, bars, restaurants, the usual stuff. Around 11:30, I got a ping for a pickup in Bridgeport, this neighborhood on the south side. The address was on a residential street. Nothing fancy, just regular houses and apartment. I pulled up to the address, and this guy came out immediately. He was probably in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Normal looking dude, nothing weird about him. He got in the back seat and told me he needed to go to an address in Pilsen. That's maybe a 15-minute drive, so I punched it into my GPS and started heading west. The guy was quiet at first, just looking out the window. I tried making small talk, asking if he was heading to a party or something, but he just said no and went back to staring. Some people don't want to chat, and that's fine. I turned up the radio a little and focused on driving. We were about halfway there when he spoke up. He asked me if I believed in second chances. I thought it was kind of a random question, but I said sure, everyone deserves a second chance. He didn't respond, just went quiet again. That's when I noticed something in the rearview mirror. His hands were shaking, not like he was cold, but like he was nervous or scared about something. I asked if he was okay, and he said he was fine, but his voice sounded different, strained, like he was holding something back. I started getting this uneasy feeling in my gut. Something about this ride felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. When we got to the address in Pilsen, I pulled up in front of this old 3-story apartment building. The guy didn't move. He just sat there in the back seat, staring at the building. I asked if this was the right place, and he nodded but still didn't get out. I was starting to get annoyed. I had other rides waiting, and this guy was just wasting time. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said this was where he used to live, before everything went wrong. He said tonight was the anniversary, and he needed to see it one more time. I didn't know what he meant, and honestly, I didn't want to know. I just wanted him out of my car. I told him the ride was over, and he needed to get out. That's when he looked at me in the rear-view mirror, and I saw his eyes. They were red, like he'd been crying for hours. He asked me what time it was. I checked my phone and told him it was 11:52 p.m. He nodded slowly and said he had 8 minutes left. 8 minutes until what? I didn't ask. I just unlocked the doors and told him again to get out. He finally opened the door and stepped onto the sidewalk. But before he closed the door, he turned back and said something I'll never forget. He said I should drive away and never come back to this street. He said something bad happened here, and it was about to happen again. I didn't wait for an explanation. I just drove off as fast as I could. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw him walking toward the building, his hands in his pockets, his head down. I turned the corner and tried to shake off the creepy feeling that was crawling up my spine. About 5 minutes later, I heard sirens. Lots of them. I checked my phone and saw a news alert. There'd been a fire in Pilsen, a 3-story apartment building. I felt my heart stop. I pulled over and read the full article. The fire had started at exactly midnight. 3 people were dead. The building was the same address I'd just dropped that guy off at. I tried looking up the names of the victims, but the article didn't list them yet. I kept checking the news for days afterward, and when they finally released the names, I saw something that made me want to throw up. One of the victims was named David Chen, 43 years old. The article said he'd lived in that building 5 years ago before moving away. He'd come back on New Year's Eve. I looked up his photo online, and it was him, the guy from my cab. But here's the thing that really messed me up. The article said investigators believed the fire had been set intentionally. They found accelerant in his old apartment, and according to the timeline, the fire started right at midnight, which means the guy I dropped off walked into that building, knowing exactly what was about to happen. He knew he had 8 minutes left, and he went inside anyway. I still drive cab in Chicago, but I refuse to pick up rides in Pilsen after 10 p.m., and every New Year's Eve, I think about that guy and those 8 minutes. I think about how he asked me if I believed in second chances. I don't think he was asking for himself. I think he was asking for the people inside that building, and I think he knew there weren't any.